Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex topics, pull out the key insights, maybe even the mind-bending ones, just for you. Today we're looking at a moment in history, maybe one of the most impactful. But it's strange because it was so incredibly brief, fleeting, really. Happened almost in the blink of an eye yet.
Well, its shadow is incredibly long. We're talking about the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And specifically, we want to zoom right in on the moment of detonation, the sheer speed of that destruction. It's weird, right? You think of the dates, August 6th, August 9th. The decisions took weeks, the consequences decades. But the actual event, the raw power, that was seconds.
Exactly. It's that compression that's just staggering. Unimaginable power squeezed into the tiny sliver of time. So for this deep dive, we've looked at, well, quite a range of sources. Scientific papers detailing the physics, historical accounts, research, and crucially, survivor testimonies. And our goal here is really to shed light on that incredibly concentrated energy release. What were its immediate effects? What's the legacy? We want you to understand how much could change, how much was transformed in literally less than a second, and what that meant then and now. The fleeting second of unimaginable power.
Okay, let's really try and get our heads around this first part because, wow, it's hard to picture. So set the scene. August 6th, 1945, it's 8:05 in the morning, local time over Hiroshima. The Enola Day, the B-29 bomber, it's just released its payload. What happens in those next few moments, just purely physically?
Right, so at 8:15 a.m., little boy starts falling. And it's not an immediate explosion on release. No, it falls for 43 seconds. Gives it time to stabilize, arm itself, get to the right altitude.
Right.
But the actual nuclear part, the fission reaction that unleashes all that energy, that started and finished in less than 1/1,000,000th of a second.
Less than a millionth of a second.
Yeah.
How do we even process that? What does that speed do physically?
It's almost impossible to visualize, isn't it?
Yeah.
1/1,000,000th of a second. That's quicker than a camera flash. Much quicker. It's about the speed of the chain reaction itself. One neutron hits an atom, splits it, releases more neutrons, they hit more atoms. It's a cascade. It just builds exponentially, almost instantly. Particles moving at, well, incredible speeds. So the whole energy release from the first split to the full boom, it feels instantaneous to a person. There's no warning, no buildup you could perceive, just bang.
Wow. And the immediate effects, they were just as fast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Within 1 single second of that detonation start,
yeah.
1 second.
The fireball had already reached its maximal size. Millions of degrees at the center, and on the ground right below, temperatures shot up to thousands of degrees Fahrenheit instantly. It didn't just burn things, it vaporized them. People, buildings, vehicles, gone. They've even found shadows permanently burned onto stone surfaces.
Shadows.
Yeah, and right on the heels of that intense heat came the shock wave. Traveling faster than sound, it created this vacuum, and this immense crushing pressure wave flattened buildings for miles. Just immense force. Little boy, the Hiroshima bomb, had a yield of about 15 kilotons, so 15,000 tons of TNT equivalent, all released in that fraction of a second.
15,000 tons in a blink. And then barely 3 days later, the world is still reeling, and it happens again. August 9th, 11:02 a.m. Nagasaki.
Was it just the same thing again, or were there differences in that detonation?
Physically, the process was almost identical. The Fat Man bomb used on Nagasaki, it followed the same incredibly rapid chain of events, but it was actually more powerful. Its yield was around 21 kilotons, more energy released than the little boy.
21, even more.
Yeah, but the duration, the time it took, just as fleeting, instantaneous, basically. Now, Nagasaki's geography, the hills and valleys, actually contained the blast a bit more than in Hiroshima, which was flatter. But still, the area right under the explosion transformed in a single heartbeat, into this landscape of just unimaginable destruction.
So that's the core of it, isn't it? The missions took hours, the fallout lasts decades, but the event itself, the actual nuclear devastation, seconds.
Precisely. That incredible concentrated power is what makes these weapons uniquely terrifying. That speed, too, witnessing the instant. It counts from the ground.
So if it all happened that fast, like literally faster than you can blink, how did people on the ground even perceive it? Those who survived, what was their first sensation?
It's fascinating. The consistency in survivor accounts. They almost all describe it as two things happening almost at once. First, the pika. That's the Japanese word they use. An incredibly bright flash of light. Brighter than the sun. Blindingly bright.
Yeah.
And immediately, like right with it, the dawn. A massive, overwhelming, deafening boom.
Pika dawn. Flash boom.
Exactly. And interestingly, many survivors initially didn't grasp it was a single city-wide event. Their first thought was often that a conventional bomb, maybe a big magnesium bomb or something, had exploded right near them.
Right, because the destruction was so immediate and localized to them.
Yes. They described being physically thrown across rooms by a force they couldn't see, violent shattering of glass everywhere, buildings just collapsing around them instantly. It was pure chaos. But their initial frame of reference was, conventional bombing, just much, much worse, and right on top of them.
That's chilling, thinking it's just your building, your street. When did that horrific realization sink in? Right. That it wasn't just nearby, it was everywhere?
It seems to have been gradual for many, but also quite quick as the initial shock wore off and the dust started to settle. Survivors talk about walking out into this completely flattened landscape, like nothing they had ever seen. Some described it like another planet. The air filled with this thick dust, the smell of burning everything.
Oh, God.
And this strange, eerie silence right after the dawn, the boom, broken only by the moans and cries of people trapped in the debris. They saw others stumbling around, blinded, skin horrifically burned, peeling off. Just utter shock and devastation. And because the destruction was so total, so uniform across such a huge area, it became clear very quickly this wasn't just a bomb. This was something different, something terrible.
And the horror didn't stop with the blast itself, did it?
No, not at all. The secondary effects kicked in with terrifying speed. The heat had ignited countless small fires all over the city. And these fires quickly grew, merging together into what's called a firestorm, a massive, uncontrollable blaze that swept through the ruins.
Consuming everything left.
Exactly. Many people who were trapped or injured who survived the initial blast, they died in those fires. People fled to the rivers in Hiroshima, trying to escape the heat and flames. But there were so many people, so many bodies already in the water that many ended up drowning.
It's unimaginable.
There's a photographer, Yoshiro Matsushi. He actually took the only known photos from Hiroshima in the immediate hours after the bombing. Just 5 pictures.
Only 5?
Yes. He described the scene as, quote, a terrible scene, just like something out of hell. And his photos, they barely capture it, but they're stark reminders of that immediate, overwhelming horror.
Of course. The context of the moment. Why these cities?
So, moving from the moment itself.
Yeah.
Why there? Why Hiroshima? Why Nagasaki? These weren't just random spots on a map.
No, definitely not random. Strategically, both cities were very important to Japan's war effort. Hiroshima was a major military headquarters. It was a huge supply and logistics hub, a communications center, a key port, lots of troops assembled there. Plus, it had significant war industries making parts for planes, boats, weapons. Okay, so a major military and industrial target. And Nagasaki.
Nagasaki was different, but also vital. Its main importance was shipbuilding, huge shipyards there. And it was a major producer of ordnance, weapons. So again, crucial industry for the war.
Right. And there's this other layer too, isn't there? Hiroshima specifically hadn't been bombed heavily before, like Tokyo or other cities.
That's a really key point. Hiroshima was actually the second largest Japanese city after Kyoto that was still largely undamaged by conventional air raids. And it wasn't an accident. It, along with Kokura, Niigata, and Kyoto, had been deliberately placed off limits to conventional bombing raids by the U.S. military.
Why? To save them for this?
Essentially, yes. The idea was to preserve these cities so that the power of the new atomic weapon could be demonstrated clearly, without confusion from previous damage. The decision to use the bombs, made by the interim committee advising President Truman, was very deliberate. They concluded the bombs should be used as soon as possible, and crucially, without any prior warning or demonstration shot.
No warning.
No. The goal was maximum psychological shock to Japan's leadership. They hoped that the sheer sudden devastation would force a quick surrender.
And this was an Allied decision.
The U.S. made the final call, but yes, the British government had also concurred with using the bombs. There was consensus among the key allies at that point. And another chilling aspect, especially regarding Hiroshima, the little boy bomb, the one used there, its specific design, the gun-type mechanism.
Yeah.
It had never actually been tested before. Not a single full-scale test detonation.
Wait, really? They dropped an untested nuclear weapon on a city?
They had tested the components, and the physics calculations were considered very solid. The plutonium bomb design, Fat Man, had been tested in the Trinity test in New Mexico. But not Little Boy.
That just adds another layer of risk or certainty. What does it tell us?
It tells us about the immense confidence the scientists had in their calculations, for one. But also, I think, the extreme pressure and urgency felt by the leadership. They were gambling, yes, but it was a calculated gamble based on the science they had. And it underscores how desperate they were to end the war quickly, to avoid what they predicted would be an incredibly bloody land invasion of Japan. It was a mix of scientific certainty and, well, strategic desperation. 4. The enduring aftermath. From seconds to decades.
We keep coming back to this paradox. Seconds of destruction, decades of consequences. Let's talk about that long shadow now.
It's impossible to overstate the human cost. Immediately, across both cities, something like 118,000 people died, just instantly or within hours. From the blast, the heat, the initial radiation burst.
118,000.
And that number climbed tragically. By the end of 1945, just a few months later, it's estimated 210,000 people had died as a result of the bombings.
What happened to those who survived the initial blast but died later?
Many succumbed to horrific injuries, burns, infections. But there was also the terrible, insidious effect of radiation sickness. People who seemed okay initially, maybe just cuts and bruises, within hours or days they'd start developing symptoms. Nausea, vomiting, hair loss, internal bleeding. It was later identified as acute radiation syndrome. Their bodies were just breaking down from the inside, a terrible, prolonged way to die.
God, the fear for the survivors must have been immense, not knowing if you were truly okay. What about the long term? Did the radiation cause problems for decades or even for their children? That's a common fear.
It is, and it's a really critical point that needs careful understanding. The long-term health effects have been studied incredibly closely, mainly by the Radiation Effects Research Foundation, or RERF. It's a joint U.S.-Japan effort. They've followed the Hibakusha, the survivors, for decades. And yes, there's a clear documented increase in the rates of certain cancers among survivors. Leukemia showed up relatively early, and then various solid cancers appeared later on, years, even decades after exposure. The risk increased with the radiation dose they received.
Okay, so increased cancer risk, definitely. What about birth defects?
This is where the science often clashes with public perception. The RERF studies, which are very extensive, have not found a statistically demonstrable increase in major birth defects or other adverse birth outcomes among children who were conceived after their parents' exposure.
So children conceived later weren't statistically more likely to have birth defects?
Correct. Nor were overall birth defects significantly higher among the children who were in utero at the time, though those exposed during pregnancy did face other health risks. This finding often surprises people, but it's what the large-scale long-term data shows.
That's important to clarify. But even without that specific effect, the social impact must have been huge.
Oh, profoundly negative. The Hibakusha, and often their children, face terrible discrimination in finding marriage partners, getting jobs, just in daily life. There was so much public ignorance and fear about radiation. People wrongly thought it might be contagious, or that the effects were definitely hereditary in ways the science didn't support. This created a deep social stigma, a secondary suffering, really, layered on top of the physical trauma.
Such a heavy burden to carry. Yet, despite all this, the cities themselves, they rebuilt. Hiroshima was rebuilt in just 6 years, apparently. That seems incredible.
It is truly remarkable, a testament to the resilience of the people there. And they didn't just rebuild physically. Both cities made a conscious choice about their identity moving forward. Hiroshima especially actively transformed itself from, a symbol of utter devastation into a global advocate for peace. They focused heavily on peace education, peace tourism. They established the Peace Memorial Park and Museum. And they started, together with Nagasaki, the Mayors for Peace initiative. It's now a global network of over 8,200 cities in, I think, 166 countries, all advocating for nuclear abolition.
Wow, over 8,000 cities.
Yeah, it's a powerful example of taking the absolute worst moment imaginable and trying to build something positive, a global call to prevent it from ever happening again. It's a real shift in purpose. Outro.
So as we wrap up, let's bring it back to that core idea. This moment of nuclear destruction, incredibly, violently fast, compressed into seconds. But its impact, its shadow, stretches right across history, and frankly, still shapes our world today.
Absolutely. And if you think about the implications, that speed, that concentration of energy, it introduced a completely new kind of terror into human conflict. Its sheer instantaneous scale underlined an existential threat like never before. And that legacy directly fueled the nuclear arms race, of course. But it also drove the efforts to control these weapons. Things like the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, and more recently, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. These international efforts are a direct response to the horror revealed in those few seconds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They stem from the desperate need to ensure such moments are never repeated.
So here's something to maybe think about as you go on with your day, a final thought for you. How does really understanding the extreme brevity of that destructive power, the fact that it took mere seconds to unleash that level of horror, how does that change how we think about global security, about the ongoing vital pursuit of peace, even all these decades later? It's definitely a question that lingers, doesn't it?